There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a clear event. There's no loss you can point to, no moment where something broke. It lives in the in-between spaces, in quiet Sunday afternoons, in the middle of conversations that should feel fine, in the strange heaviness that settles sometimes without explanation. It's the feeling of a life that wasn't lived, not the life you have, the other one, the one that branched off somewhere and kept going without you, the relationship you didn't pursue, the path you didn't take, the version of yourself that made a different choice at a moment that turned out to matter more than you knew. Most people call this regret, but that word is too small for what it actually is. Because regret isn't just the memory of a wrong turn, it's a living thing. It grows. It shapes the way you read the present. It colours the future before it arrives. It sits in the background of good days and in the foreground of bad ones, quietly asking a question you can never fully answer. What if? Regret is not simply the recognition that a different choice would have produced a better outcome. That's just information. Information doesn't keep you up at night. Information doesn't surface unbidden in the middle of a meal. Information doesn't produce that specific, unmistakable ache that regret carries. What makes regret different is the counterfactual, the other possibility that didn't happen. The road not taken, not as a metaphor, but as a felt, vivid, almost physical presence in the mind. The mind doesn't just remember what happened. It actively constructs what could have happened. And the could have is often more emotionally vivid than the actual. The unlived life never existed. It was always only potential. And yet the grief for it can be as heavy as the grief for something real. Because the potential was real. The choice was real. The moment where the path diverged was real. And what was lost was not an imagined future, but the actual possibility of it. That is what you're grieving when you grieve a regret. Not a fantasy, but something that was available, that you could see, could reach, could have chosen, and didn't. There's a pattern researchers have documented. In the short term, people regret their actions more than their inactions. But over time, years, decades, a lifetime, the pattern reverses completely. What people regret most in the end are not the things they did. They are the things they didn't do. The risks not taken, the feelings not expressed, the version of themselves they never quite allowed to exist. And this is why the heaviest regrets are almost never about the mistakes you made. They're about the person you didn't become. Here's what regret does to you when you don't look at it directly. It doesn't stay in the past, it migrates. It finds its way into the present and begins to organize it. Subtly, persistently, in ways you don't always recognize as regret. It shows up as a low-grade dissatisfaction with the life you have, not crisis. Just a background sense that something is slightly off, that the life you're living is adjacent to the one you were supposed to live, but not quite it. It shows up as sensitivity to certain stories. The person who took the risk you didn't take and it worked out. The relationship someone else pursued and built into something real. And it produces a particular kind of caution that masquerades as wisdom. You stop taking risks. You don't pursue things fully. You hold yourself slightly back from the things that matter most, because holding back feels like protection. But it's not protection, it's the regret spreading. Jung wrote that what we don't bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. The regret we don't face doesn't disappear. It begins to direct. It shapes choices from underneath the level of awareness. The person who regrets not having expressed love begins to withhold it more. The person who regrets a risk not taken becomes more risk averse. The person who regrets not becoming who they could have been begins to make it less and less likely that the becoming will happen. Not because they chose this, but because the unexamined wound always deepens the pattern that created it. There's something underneath the regret that almost never gets named. Not the missed opportunity, not the wrong choice. It's the self-judgment that has attached itself to all of it, because regret for most people carries a verdict. An indictment of the person who made the choice, or didn't make it, who had the opportunity and let it pass. And self-judgment of that kind doesn't motivate change. That is the cruel irony at its centre. We carry it as if it were useful, as if punishing ourselves for the choice we didn't make is a form of loyalty to the life we didn't live. But it isn't. It's just weight. Weight that costs something every day, that occupies space that could be occupied by presence, by attention, by genuine engagement with the life that is actually happening. The belief that the choices you made have made you into someone permanently lesser, someone for whom the best possibilities have already closed. That belief is not the truth, but it feels like the truth when you've been carrying it long enough. If you've stayed with me through all of this, I want to stop here for a moment. What we've been talking about today is the kind of thing that tends to live in the background, not the acute pain that everyone sees, the quieter kind, the weight you carry into ordinary days without always knowing it's there. If something in this conversation names something you've been carrying, that matters. Letting go of regret begins not with releasing the past, but with changing your relationship to it. Not pretending it didn't happen, but asking honestly what the regret has been doing for you. Because regret, however painful, always serves a function. It keeps the unlived life present. It maintains loyalty to the self you could have been. And that loyalty, even when it costs you, is a form of honouring what mattered. The beginning of release is not forgetting. It is grieving, actually grieving, allowing the full weight of what was lost to be felt. Grief is not weakness. It is the honest acknowledgement that something real was lost. The regret you carry is not just a record of what didn't happen. It is a map of what you actually wanted. Because the things you regret not doing are the things that mattered enough to grieve. The paths not taken were paths you actually wanted. The person you didn't become was a person you genuinely could have been, and in some real sense, still are in potential. That is not a consolation. It is information. Information about who you are underneath the choices you made, about what you value when you're honest rather than careful. The unlived life is not entirely gone. It is pointing at something that is still here. The weight of the unlived life doesn't have to be only a burden. It can be a compass. The weight that was pulling backward begins to point forward. The grief for what could have been becomes slowly information about what still could be. That voice that says not yet, it doesn't go quiet on its own. It goes quiet when you stop listening to it and start moving anyway. The unlived life will always have been unlived. That is permanent. But what you do with what it showed you, that is still in motion. It is still, even now, being decided. And that is not a small thing. That is everything that remains available, which, if you look at it honestly, is more than enough to work with. If this video reached something you've been carrying, share it with someone who needs it. They'll know why you sent it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what your regret has been pointing at. I'll see you in the next one.